So my name is Jakub. I'm an independent software consultant living in the UK, but I'm Polish. I'm going to try to teach you today how to write loosely coupled code. First, I'll make some introduction to what coupling is, and then we move on to exercises based on Symfony demo. We'll try to refactor it to make it less coupled to the framework. Are you awake? Yep. I'm not. So how many of you actually used Symfony? Good. Okay. Oof. I kind of assumed that you did. Yeah, so before you start, I want to see the PHP unit passing, and that's not going to work this way. Also, it's worth to configure Git on your VMs, because we'll try to commit stuff from within the VMs. Yep?
Can I see the previous slide, please?
Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, it didn't fit into a single slide. If you have any issues, either ask me right away, or there's two guys in the back, Marek and I don't know your name. Yeah. They're here to help resolve any issues. So also please configure Git on your VM. You probably have it configured on your host machine, but do it on the VM as well, just so we could commit. Okay, let's move on. Could anyone tell me what coupling is?
So hello once again. That the code is deeply correlated with the framework you are using or other external libraries. So today probably we are going to talk about decoupling and how to change this framework and, or in example, the library we are using in the code.
Yes, that's what we'll be talking about. But coupling is not only coupling to the framework, but coupling exists between any code modules, I would say. So it might be a coupling between two functions, two classes, two libraries, two modules. It could be perceived on multiple levels. Martin Fowler defines coupling that modules are coupled to each other if changing one of them requires changing the other. Simple as that. It's not that we can avoid coupling. If we were writing code that's totally not coupled to, if modules were not coupled to each other, they wouldn't actually accomplish anything. Okay? So we don't try to avoid coupling. We try to achieve loose coupling. So here, tight coupling, you might imagine, is code that's very close. All the modules are very close to each other. They have many dependencies. So when you try to change one thing, you need to change it in lots of places. While loose coupling, you have modules that talk to each other through well-defined interfaces. So it's easy to take one of them out and put another one instead of that in place. So coupling exists whenever we reference, coupling between classes exists whenever we reference one class from within the other one. So it might be through a property. In this case, we have a crawler class, which is coupled to the browser because it holds a reference in a property. It might be through a method call. So crawler calls some object that returns the browser. It's still coupled to the browser. Makes sense? Through a reference, so if we pass an object to a method of another object, it's coupled to that object. Simple as that. Or if it returns the instance of that object, it still knows about it, knows about that class, it's coupled to that class. Finally, if we extend another class, we couple to that. That's the probably most obvious type of coupling. So if your crawler extends the browser, it's coupled to the browser. So I'll present diagrams. They're not strictly UMLs, but they represent direction of coupling. So in this case, crawler depends on the browser. So if browser changes, our crawler is affected. Simple as that. Make sense? Still not awake? So why should we bother? Why we just don't do this? Just use curl, write in our crawl method, then whatever it returns, parse the document, then put it into the database. Isn't it better? Anyone?
There is a lot of code application if you do this.
Yes, if we have more than one crawler, you repeat that code in.
Security concerns, edge cases,
Yeah.
exception handling,
Yeah.
AWS.
Maintainability. Right. It's, there's lots of code in a single method or in a single class, so it's harder to maintain, harder to understand. Coupling is often, well, coupling often exists with cohesion. It often is presented with cohesion. Cohesion describes how closely elements are related to each other. So in the previous example, when we had a crawler that makes a connection through curl, parses the document, puts it in a database, it kind of does three different things. Right? So those things are not really related to each other. What we want to aim for is loose coupling. So for modules that are, we aim for loose coupling, so modules are, now it's too loud. Modules are loosely related to each other, so that they're independent, they can be replaced. And high cohesion, so modules are doing one thing only. So these two things are actually quite strictly related to two of the SOLID principles. I'm not sure if you're familiar with SOLID principles of object-oriented programming. Who is not familiar with them? Okay, everyone's familiar. So just quickly remind you, single responsibility principle. So to actually achieve high cohesion, we just need to apply the single responsibility principle. It says module should have one reason to change. Or maybe better said, gather together things that change together and separate those that change for different reasons. That's a very good definition. So in our crawler example, when we had curl, some parsing, and a database, all those things might change for a different reason. We might replace curl with something else, like file system loading, for one reason, when we change the location of the document from the web to the file system. We might change the way we parse the document because the document structure has changed. That's a different reason. Or we might change database to some other location to persist it somewhere else. That's yet another reason to change. Right? So this is a single responsibility principle. So applied well, we achieve, applying by a single responsibility principle, we achieve high cohesion. And then to achieve loose coupling, it's enough to apply the dependency inversion principle. So let me quickly remind you what dependency inversion is about. Again, a crawler example. So we've got a package crawler, and the package crawler uses Buzz browser. That's a small library for making HTTP connections. So Buzz browser is injected into the constructor. We use dependency injection, great. And then in the crawl method, we just use it to fetch the resource. And the dependency inversion principle says that high-level modules shouldn't depend on low-level modules. What's a high-level module here? Well, high-level module is our package crawler. In high-level terms, we can describe what it does. It takes the document, parses the content, and stores it somewhere. Okay? And the browser is an implementation detail. It's one of the possibilities we can choose. That's a low-level technicality. We fetch it through HTTP. So the principle says that high-level modules shouldn't depend on low-level modules. And in this case, our package crawler depends on the browser. So high-level module depends on the low-level module. So it's something like this, right? Dependency goes from package crawler to bus browser. So package crawler depends on the browser. So if there's something wrong with the browser, or if we want to replace it, we need to modify the crawler. If you have more than one crawler, obviously you have lots of code to modify. So this is a quite tight coupling. So further, the principle explains, so both should depend on abstractions. So instead of relying on the browser directly, we introduce an abstraction. Let's say HTTP client, that's going to be an interface. Like this, simple interface, get method, get resource, return something. And then instead of injecting the browser, we inject our interface. So we already don't rely on something external. Bus browser is not our library. We don't have control over it. HTTP client is our interface. We have full control over it. And both should depend on abstractions. So also the bus browser should depend on our abstraction. Obviously, we can't submit a pull request to bus browser's author and say, hey, could you implement this interface? Because we need it in our project. That's not going to work. But there's a simple solution to this. We can use the adapter pattern and simply decorate the browser to adapt it to our interface. There's one more problem with this. Further rule explains, the principle explains, sorry for this. Abstractions should not depend on details. And by creating this abstraction, HTTP client, we kind of derive the name from the browser. It's something that goes through HTTP. And that's an implementation detail. Still, that's an implementation detail that leaked into our abstraction, into our interface name. So perhaps it would be better called content provider. Content provider is an interface more suitable from the perspective of the package crawler. It doesn't imply that we're going to go through HTTP. It might be a file system, might be a database. Doesn't matter, anything that provides the content we need. So details should depend on abstractions. But the rest remains the same, we just rename the interface. So we still inject it into the package crawler, and then we have an adapter for the bus to use it. So the thing now is, if we have multiple crawlers that rely on our own package crawler, content provider interface, we provide the adapter that adapts bus browser to our interface. So what happens now if bus browser changes? If there's a bug in bus browser, if the author decides to change their interface, where do we need to go to modify our code? The adapter. Not sure if I heard correctly, but that's the right answer. Right, so there's only one place we need to go. All our crawlers are unaffected. We don't have to modify that code. There's only bus content provider. So there's no dependency going from bus from crawlers to the bus browser. Dependencies are inverted. So that's dependency inversion in a nutshell. What if we decide to change the bus browser? Okay, bus browser is no longer cool. We need Guzzle. Everyone is using Guzzle, and it offers additional features like caching. We need Guzzle. We simply provide a new implementation of our content provider interface. Notice that the implementation is quite different from bus. It's more complex. Perhaps calling Guzzle is more complex. We don't care. We only have it in here in a single place. We don't have to modify our crawlers. While with highly coupled code, we would need to go to every single crawler, replace pass browser get with this. Okay, so now it looks like this. And we could easily provide yet another implementation for file system or in memory for tests to make our tests faster. Any questions so far? Don't be scared. Is it clear? Yes. Yep, okay. So let's move on to the Symfony demo. Did everyone try this in the browser already? So if you go to lose.php.sc, you should see a demo of Symfony. If you open the project at the top level, up bundle, there's a single bundle in the project. Can you tell me what it is about? It has controllers, commands, entities. What's the domain of this project? It is an app. It is a Symfony app, and it screams at you that I'm a Symfony app. So this is an example of highly coupled application. Everything is in a single place. So if you drill deeper, let's open the block controller. And the index action. Now we can see that there's a doctrine used, entity manager, fetches repository, finds the latest blog posts. So what if we want to replace the latest blog posts? We want to replace fetching from the database with Elasticsearch. What do we need to do? Every single controller we want to use Elasticsearch in, which might not be every single controller. For the admin interface, we might just want to fetch it from the database. Here, we would probably prefer to have Elasticsearch, which is more performant for querying, right? So this application is very highly coupled to Doctrine at the moment. It's everywhere. You can't even tell what queries are made and from where. If you're new to the project, it's very hard to start working with it. So it looks like this. Our block controller depends on Doctrine and depends on Doctrine in many places. So our goal for today is decouple from Doctrine. There's too many things to fix here to totally decouple it from everything, but our goal for today is only decouple from Doctrine. We won't look at coupling to Symfony too much or any other libraries, just Doctrine. So in the end, we'll have something like this. Our block controller won't depend on Doctrine. It will depend on our block. You might call it a domain. And we have a Doctrine adapter that adapts that block to Doctrine. So there's no direct dependency from the block controller to Doctrine. Make sense? Any questions so far?
Do you call the adapter exactly Doctrine adapter?
It's just a model here. might be an adapter. I often call it infrastructure. We'll call it infrastructure actually in these exercises.
Would you prefer to add design pattern name at the end of the name of the class?
I'll just be repeating your questions so everyone can hear. Would I be putting design pattern names in the class names or module names? Not very often, rather not.
And what do you think about the word interface at the end? Because the
Word interface in the end.
Inside, prefer to add the word interface at the end of the interface class.
Yes, Sensor Labs Insight does that. You can turn it off. That's a bad practice. That's a bad practice in my opinion. Putting in an interface suffix to the interfaces. That's what we do in Symfony. And we do that for consistency and for, I would say, practices that were used when Symfony started. So to be consistent with them, we just can't change it. And why I think it's a bad idea to put an interface suffix? Because if I put, with the previous example, if I put content provider interface as a class name, it would kind of be natural to call the implementation class content provider, while it's not a good name for the implementation. It doesn't say what's different about that specific implementation. While if I call it content provider, I'm kind of forced to give a better name to the implementation. I can say that's bus content provider or a file system content provider. That class name is not used anywhere anyway. We always rely on the interface. And the class name is only used when you initialize it. So probably in the service container. So we'll start with registering our repositories as a service, as services. If you look at the code again, there's a repository directory. And that's wired up in Doctrine. So if you ask here, if you ask the Doctrine entity manager for the post repository, it knows it should return an instance of this post repository here, which is a standard entity repository. Okay? The problem is we ask for it in the application. We want to decouple from it, so we want to push it to the service container, so that here we don't know nothing about Doctrine. Okay, so I'll do a few exercises with you on the screen, so just to make it easier in the beginning. So we start with the post repository and register it as a service. So let's go to the app-config services YML. That's a default in Symfony. And you actually have something in here commented out, so you can just uncomment it. That's going to work almost fine. You just need to fix the indentation. YAML is very sensitive. There's one space too much in this example, so we just indent it back. Oop. Now it's actually like this. Just be careful, there's always 4 spaces indentation. And there's one more thing to fix. I'm not sure why in this example there's an entity repository here. There's actually a specific post repository. I'm not sure why I don't have auto-completion now. Everyone knows what they're doing, or should I explain more? That depends on your Symfony knowledge, how much you know about Symfony. It's fine if you don't.
There is another way to create the repository as a service, and you can call the entity manager and call the method inside, which will be preference.
Not sure what you mean. Well, we could, this is the easier way now to refactor, but that works if your post repository actually extends the entity manager. You could have just any post repository class that doesn't extend the entity manager and simply inject the entity manager inside of your repository. Which is actually probably better, because your class doesn't extend the entity repository and doesn't offer you those magic methods that are provided by the entity manager. Entity repository, base entity repository class. For now, that's enough. Okay, and if we go back to the controller, now we can replace these. You can just remove it. I'll comment it out just to show it the difference. And get the post repository. Okay, I think my Symfony. If you didn't enable Symfony 2 plugin, just do that. That's going to make your life easier. You just need to look for Symfony plugin and tick this box, and then restart PHP Storm. If you do this, you should now have auto-completion for services. Run your tests. Sorry. Should still pass. So now, at least at this point in this specific index action, we don't have any knowledge of doctrine registry, at least. It is still an entity repository, so we can still call any method on the entity repository, but it's kind of, we're introducing like an additional layer between doctrine and our controllers. These controllers might be services, by the way. This application is simple, so it calls repositories directly. But in a real-life applications, you'd probably be calling services here, and those services would rely on doctrine, so we'd have to make them less dependent on doctrine rather than controllers. Once you're done with this, do the same for the user repository and the comment repository. Comment repository doesn't exist, so you need to create it. Yep, everyone knows what to do. If anyone has issues, just shout or raise a hand. You're all asleep. No one was cycling this morning? User repository is used in commands. This is an awful command. No? Oh.
Does unit test cover this command?
No. So you'll have to run it from the command line to test it. There's two commands. There's uplist and add user. I'm doing this quickly on purpose, so you do it yourself. Oh. So comment repository is not used anywhere, but the user repository is using commands, and there's a few more cases where you can use the post repository. Hello. So also fix that. And where you access the entity manager for post repository, also just fetch it as a service. So there's definitely one in the admin block controller. So I have prepared like the results of each of the exercises committed to the branch. So just to make sure we are in sync, I've prepared that command. I'm a bit worried. I'm not sure if that's going to work. What it does, it commits your work into new branch so that it's not lost, and then checks out the result of the exercise. So fingers crossed. You need to confirm. So just press Y. Worked for me. If anyone has an error, just let me know. That's important that it worked. Oh, no. Some of you have used master branch instead of the PHP summer camp. So this command is not defined on the master branch. Yeah, lots of you did that. So those who started with a master branch, commit it just for yourself, and switch to this one. 1.1 repository services. Actually, wait. We did 2 exercises at once, so those for who the save command worked, do it again. And the others switch to the 1.2. Who's it failing for?
Does this mean that we miss some of the dependencies if we install composer dependencies for master branch? Because I see now that there is some errors on
Yeah, that's true.
which is a problem because of the internet connection.
but it shouldn't be a big problem. So also those who worked on master branch switch to the 1.2 repository services, repository query methods, and run composer install.
One more.
Yeah. We're not going to introduce any more dependencies. Okay. Next exercise. There's still a few usages of Doctrine Entity Manager in the both controllers and one command. So like here, persist comment, flash, that still depends on Doctrine. What can we do here? Yeah, that's one option. Or move it to the repository. And that's, at the moment, the simplest thing we can do, so let's just do that. So whenever you see persist something, just push it to the appropriate repository. I'll just do the first one. What do you do with a comment? Save, is it? Do you? So more from the main perspective, you post a comment, right? So try to name these methods from the domain perspective. Obviously, this method doesn't exist. Za dużo save'ów. Yes, so the question was, should I flash from the inside of the repository? And there's few approaches to that. That's one of them. It's not always, kind of depends on the project. Some people prefer to flash all of the operations at once at the end of the request, so use listeners for that. Yeah. Anyway, the can't be closed after flash. That you're flashing too late then. It shouldn't be, definitely shouldn't be in the controller. It's a Doctrine implementation detail, I would say. Other persistence libraries might not have this, right? This is typical Doctrine thing.
Why are you flushing the whole entity manager, not just this command?
Because I was lazy. That's a good point, because then might more things might have happened, and this would flash them all. So yeah, you might add it just to flash this one. So look for such operations in the code base. There's probably one more in the block controller, few in the admin block controller, and one in command. And push them to repositories. Okay. I think we'll have a 15-minute break now. Sorry for this. Try to fix this on the break. So come back in 15 minutes.